The Toronto Raptors have once again been blessed by the NBA, as the team is in a very precarious position entering next season, just giving the reins to Scottie Barnes and other players to see how good they're going to be at the start of next season. That's going to lead to some serious decisions having to be made amongst other players on the roster, including Jakob Poeltl and other veterans, and whether or not they're going to be buyers, sellers entering this year's trade market. Because we all know, as Toronto Raptors fans, we are sick and we don't want to see this team be mid-level in the Eastern Conference for years to come, right? You bottom out and you get one of those elite draft prospects, or you contend and build around this core group of Scottie Barnes, Immanuel Quickley, and RJ Barrett and try to build that winning culture right away. Well, given how the schedule that was just released over the past couple of days has been released, has been played out, we are going to get answers. It's going to be very clear as to how good this team is right from the jump, as essentially we can break it all down here right away as the schedule has come out for this Toronto Raptors team, and you can see it. It's tough to see on the smaller size there. We have an absolutely front-loaded schedule. In the first 10 games, we're playing the Cavaliers, the Sixers, the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Denver Nuggets, the Lakers, who we're not sure if going to be solid, but the Sacramento Kings, the Denver Nuggets once again in Sacramento. Those are, with the exception of the Hornets, who I do think could be a sneaky good improvement in terms of a team in the Eastern Conference this season. But 9 out of 10 of those teams are very, very solid playoff caliber teams out there in the Eastern and Western Conference. We also have a little road trip early on in November in the NBA season. So, not only are we facing off against some crazy competition, some of the best teams in the NBA right from the jump. Over the first 2 months of the season, we are facing some of the toughest competition that the NBA has to offer. We're also playing a lot of these games on the road, playing a lot of these games in the Western Conference with different time zones and different places. So what does that mean? Because again, why would this be a blessing? Why would this be a positive for this Toronto Raptors group? Well, essentially, as I said from the jump, the Toronto Raptors are in that sort of mid-level state. They're in that mid-level position where we aren't sure whether or not this team is here to contend, or if we're going to need another year of essentially rebuilding and, turning this roster into a team that needs a Cooper Flag or one of those sort of top 5, top 7 draft prospects in the upcoming NBA draft in order to build forward and move forward with this group. Well, essentially, the Toronto Raptors come out and we see that Scottie Barnes just isn't able to lead a team, isn't able to take this Raptors core group, isn't ready to be that number one on a winning contending team. Then, hey, we can trade away Jakob Poeltl, get rid of our centers, and then we'll bottom out once again for really the second half of this year to take and facilitate those L's and get a top-notch draft pick. Because, again, at times, sometimes you play easier schedules. If we had a ton of Pistons games, if we had a ton of just the lower-level NBA teams out there in the first 20 games of the season, and this team was still mid, was still not a team on the uprise, still a team in a little bit of decline, not really put together properly, then there's going to be some false assumptions. There's going to be some hope that, hey, this Raptors group can contend, can compete with the types of teams out there in the Eastern Conference just to come around February. We're still in the middle of the pack of the East. And then, we have a tough backloaded schedule, and we just end up the 11th seed in the Eastern Conference once again. So what this schedule does, what it allows for this team to do is say, hey, we can look at guys like Scottie Barnes and say, we looked at his sort of production last season again, took a major step forward, 20 points per game, 8 rebounds, 6 assists. Just a guy that was really on the upswing in terms of NBA young talent. We just gave a massive contract to, RJ Barrett has a solid contract, but he just had a phenomenal Olympic performance, 25-3 on last season, and really did well for the Toronto Raptors. We gave a big contract to Immanuel Quickley, who I don't have his stats up there right now, but essentially what the Toronto Raptors can do with this schedule, with this front-loaded schedule that we can see is one of the toughest in the NBA. Essentially, Raptors analyst came out, and Caritha said that a delayed fun fact of last season's records, the Raptors have a 566 opponent win percentage up until the NBA Cup and knockout round. So that's the hardest strength of schedule to start the NBA season for any NBA team. So essentially, the Toronto Raptors have the toughest schedule early on in this year, so this team is going to be battle tested. This team is going to face off against the teams that, again, we don't need them to win every single game in order to look at it as, okay, we don't need to blow or, win every game. And then, if you kind of go mid-level or whatever, and then fans are going to be out there tanking and stuff like that. But we'll have a good feel about how this team plays against the upper echelon squads, the teams that we'll be facing to at least contend for a playoff position, get out of that play-in tournament out there in the Eastern Conference. We will have a feel for how good this roster actually is. As the Raptors optimist, I always am. I'm still confident in this group with Scottie, IQ, RJ, even Jakob Poeltl, with this team to be able to contend. With those 4 guys out there in the lineup last season, they're actually really effective. They are one of the top 2% in terms of lineups out there in the NBA. Obviously, there was no depth on the team, especially with all the injuries and stuff, and that team, those lineups barely played together. So that is how it is, with this Toronto Raptors group. But we have guys now that could step in. A Davion Mitchell, a Gradey Dick, who's a year older. We have Jakob Poeltl coming off the bench, Jonathan Mogbo. We have some interesting pieces now that could slide into this Toronto Raptors team and help out in terms of the depth department, in terms of this. So there's a chance that with this current core group, with the young guys, with the whole direction that we've been trending in, hey, we beat a lot of these sort of teams that, again, we can take a look at it, the type of list. This is the wrong sort of, we're going crazy. This is some OG Raptors Digest stuff with all the animations and graphics. Not my regular setup, as you guys can tell. But essentially, with everything that's the schedule that they have going, right? First 10 games being tough. Then we have the LA sort of Western Conference road trip. We play the Bucks. We have the Pistons in there a couple times, but then there's Boston, Indiana, Minnesota, New Orleans, who are going to be a solid squad with DeJounte Murray, Miami a couple times, Indiana. Around the December 9th mark, we're going to have a really good feel about how this team plays against the upper echelon teams in the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference and the entire NBA. And if they're playing well, again, they don't have to win every single game, but if they're on that upward swing, maybe come trade deadline, we're buyers and we try to push for that 6, 7, that 6 seed to get out of that play-in tournament for this Toronto Raptors group. Maybe we're even higher and things are rolling smooth. But if we just absolutely get decimated, we get dominated, we get crushed by all these teams, we go, some people are saying 1-9 in the first 10 games. I've seen some predictions out there for this Toronto Raptors group, and things just don't end up getting better for the Toronto Raptors team come mid-December. That's when, that's when the Toronto Raptors kind of started facilitating the OG Anunoby trade. Those talks really ended up ramping up. So we have a really nice sort of path for this Raptors group to get battle tested, to get some big momentum wins for this team early on in the season. And again, it doesn't have to go perfect in order to not blow it out. For a mid-level team after this absolute bloodbath of a schedule to start off this year, then I'm going to be very confident in terms of the team's ability to push out there in the second half of the season, the back half of the season, when the competition gets easier. We're facing less of the more established teams out there in the NBA, and this team ends up coming out and getting some W's. So that's kind of what has to go, because if things do get messy, if things don't really work out for the Toronto Raptors, they have some decisions to make. You have Jakob Poeltl out there on the roster, who is going to be 29 years old entering next season. 11 points per game, 9 rebounds. Isn't much of a three-point shooter, but obviously it's one of the better center big men in the entire NBA. Plays defense, does his thing out there on both ends of the floor as a finisher. Just doesn't shoot the basketball and doesn't shoot the free throws particularly well. But essentially, he could be a trade bait. He could be a sort of piece. We have Chris Boucher's contract, we have Bruce Brown's contract, all different guys. So Masai Ujiri has some flexibility, has some ability to make moves if things are getting messy at the start of the season. Basically, we'll know come, December 9th, what direction the Toronto Raptors should end up going in, for this squad entering next year. But let me know what you guys think about this Toronto Raptors team, moving into that space with this group in the comment section down below. You guys are the best to make it this far. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.